We're looking forward to telling you today about how we used online qualitative bulletin boards to answer a client-specific question. So we're going to start by giving you a little bit of background about what was going on and how we got there. Our client is a big global leader, and they provide cleaning and hygiene products and solutions for businesses, and they're really focusing on how to get to a healthy workspace. They operate in virtually all countries across the globe, and they really wanted to understand on a very anecdotal, open level what employees' behaviors and needs were in the workplace. So it was very much an in situ need, and they wanted to understand what things really look like in offices all over the world. And ultimately, it was going to guide the development of new products and solutions. So let us tell you a little bit more. So what made us choose an online qualitative approach, right? Because there are lots of different things you could do. And I thought it was an interesting question that somebody had earlier about how clients accept whether the online approach is correct or whether they're open to it. So why go online this time instead of traditional? Well, we already mentioned that our client operates all over the globe, and in this case, they were specifically interested in 10 different countries. To approach this from a traditional standpoint, if we really were to understand kind of the on-site, how employees deal with their workspace, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, it could have been a hugely burdensome project, really. Going to 10 different countries, conducting, on-site observations, maybe interviewing people. It could be tremendously expensive, and it could take a tremendous amount of time, too. So we decided to go with an online approach, and the other kind of background things that we felt it would really be useful to do is they wanted to understand both globally and at a country level what's going on for workers in offices, what they like. We knew that with the online approach, we could get access to the target audiences that we need, and we can also let them take a peek kind of under the curtain and see what's going on as we do the research, right? So rather than bring them along on every single interview or observational visit, we can just let them kind of peek onto the online board and see what's going on. So got a tremendous amount of buy-in from local stakeholders, and that was part of the intent. And again, the time and effort and cost involved to do this in a more traditional way would have been substantial. So this really, doing it online, really compressed the time for insight across all of the markets that we were trying to get to. So why online bulletin boards, right? Because there are other methods to do online work as well. We've done blog projects before. We could do kind of a mobile approach. We really wanted two things to happen. We wanted to get that very, very visual and kind of storytelling aspect of what it was like in their offices and how they perceived their workplaces. But we also wanted to be able to ask them questions, and blogs work great, kind of an online blog platform instead of a bulletin board platform, but doesn't really have the same opportunity for the questions to come back. So we wanted to make sure that was possible. So what else about online bulletin boards? They're creative, they're interactive, they're very comfortable for a lot of people. Tom was talking about this before. They're very flexible in time in this case, and Marcel is going to tell you a little bit more about this. This was a 2-week board. We had a lot of questions, a lot of material we wanted to cover, and a lot of insight that we wanted to get from them. We talked about the client involvement before and how important that was to us, especially, and perhaps not overridingly, but especially on the local level. And we knew that we could get their involvement this way. You're able to, of course, customize the questions, right? And as we were talking about earlier, too, the multimedia touch points are absolutely crucial, as Tom mentioned, since language is only 10% of culture. How do I really understand what it's like in China, for instance? And a picture really does paint 1,000 words. And with the platform that we use, we know that they can load information, and so we get really not just their language, not just their storytelling, but also the actual pictures and even some videos, which was marvelous. Our organization actually has a very strong quant heritage as well, and so there were some kind of exercises that we thought we could insert and actually worked really effectively, and ultimately with 10 countries and 15 or so participants in each, we actually got a nice global sample that we're actually able to analyze on. And it is, of course, very much a semi-ethnographic approach. I always refrain from calling it ethnographic because I think that does us a little disservice to all the true ethnographers out there. So a quick reminder, I think probably a lot of you know this, but what exactly is an online bulletin board, and I guess what is it in the situation in which we did it? This is not an ongoing thing. This was a specific moderated online discussion group, certainly not a free-fall, and not even a panel in our case. We recruited people specifically that we thought would be able to help answer our questions in each of the countries. We had very specific criteria, as in a traditional qual approach. And even, I think one of the questions that came up in the last talk is kind of the whole idea of how do you get these people in. For us, we find that a local approach works really, really well in each of the countries. And we especially like having some actual contact with participants and not just an online or email recruit, because the modality itself is online. So it's kind of nice to have an actual contact before you pop them onto this online platform. Of course, it's moderated as in traditional qual research. As I talked about briefly, and Marcel will talk about too more, it's really nice to have the ongoing client participation so that you can tweak questions. And Marcel will talk about the native moderators we used, because the other thing that they were able to do is, again, make it country specific and make it really useful and applicable in the countries that we were interested in. And like any other online discussion forum that you've ever seen, it's hierarchical, kind of tree-like in structure. So ultimately, respondents start speaking with each other, which we love. And the moderator obviously can pose follow-up questions, either kind of toward the top of the original question or exercise, or further down the line. So tons of advantages here, obviously, or obvious to us, I guess, and also accompanied by challenges, and we learned some really interesting lessons, and Marcel is going to take us through those.
Well, thank you very much, Hannah. These challenges, they were not only big, they were humongous. I mean, we're talking about a 2-week time span, which we included 10 countries across the globe. Some of the countries that Tom spoke about earlier in his presentation. We're looking from, it ranged from Canada to Russia, from Australia to Colombia, and of course, Europe and the US could not be missed. So we included a couple of European countries and, of course, the United States. As Hannah mentioned earlier, approximately 15 respondents per board. I think we ended up with about 120 respondents, so perfectly suitable for a quant analysis, but also for some local input out of these quant results. We really looked at an output of nearly 7,500 pages of transcripts, and not everything was in English. 60%, of course, was other languages. In order to manage everything, we used daily synopsis per country and all organized daily feedback sessions with the moderators and the clients, and Hannah's going to tap into that later. Well, in spite of what the Rolling Stones say, time is not always on our side. Time zones vary within and across country. The moderators had to log in, say, basically 24/7. Countries that clients were in, or local clients and global clients, depending on where they were, it was huge. The challenge to manage and including this global client team with each country-specific stakeholders in the process, we felt it was necessary to include them, and they all had access to the boards, And that basically led to real-time discussion and issues and ideas that were brought up that we could then, as moderators, reinsert in the country-specific boards. And the alignment between clients and moderators, the constant alignment, made sure that learnings from Spain were brought into the board in Brazil, and then the results could then be used to further probe in Australia. We really used the time difference in our advantage. Project timing-wise, we had to adapt to lots of country differences. Recruitment timelines, of course, varied. Some countries like Brazil and Colombia took way longer to recruit, and the pace of the respondents was also slower. So even though we started at the same time, we ended at very different times. Some boards took basically longer than 2 weeks because the people there were a bit slower. We staggered the recruitment in order to make sure that we could actually start on time. And as already mentioned, long response times happened in different countries. But how to recruit those respondents? We also customized it per country. Funnily enough, we didn't have to recruit in China because everyone participated for a full 100%. But Brazil and Colombia, we lost a lot of respondents, so we had to either top it up or maybe next time start with even more to make sure that we end in with the targeted number that we actually promised to the client. As Hannah say, yeah, think about custom recruit versus panel recruitment. This personal touch from a personal recruitment approach really makes sure that respondents keep engaged from beginning to end of the project. We developed global exercises and global questions, but unfortunately, they didn't always work. Especially in Asia Pacific, some projective techniques were considered silly and didn't really work out well. So the feedback that we had with the moderators, we basically then changed some of the exercises and adapted them to the local situation. And also, we could help, as moderators, we could help each other into, providing some clarification or some more feedback on the exercises to the respondents. We also noticed differences in the ability and willingness to actually upload pictures or movies or express how the respondents felt. So that is also something that you have to take into account. So the local and global work behavior norms changed, and the output that was generated also changed. Get the idiom right. I mean, it's truly necessary to have native language moderators because those are the people that can really make a difference, interpreting what's happening on the board and also interpreting the language used and the images uploaded. As Hannah mentioned earlier, we have a pool of in-house international moderators in each country fully engaged in these projects. The key to success in all this is engagement. Our moderator team made sure that they build from the beginning onwards a personal relationship and really maintain that relationship throughout the duration of the board. We started with easy and exciting tasks and early on showed the bigger picture and show perspective of what we really wanted to happen on the board. And basically, that is kind of like a difference from the offline qual approach where you just move into a discussion and end, and then at the end have the bigger picture. Individual and group follow-up allows to have a comfortable atmosphere for respondents. So individual, like personal one-on-one probing helped, but then group probing on a group level also made sure that everyone was engaged and comfortable in answering the questions and engaging in the exercises. Most importantly, we used an easy platform to ensure that everyone was able to actually use the program and information was not missed. Well, I want to now show you a couple of the exercises that we went through. full image banks emerged per country, and without those native moderators, images or language used could be interpreted incorrectly. So that was it was great output, but without the use of those people, the output could be misinterpreted. We included different quant exercises and alternated that with the dialogue that was going on. Here's an example of the MaxDiv exercise that we included in our online bulletin board to get a glimpse of the priorities of health and wellness programs in this case per country, but also to make sure that with the number of respondents we had to get a global feel of and good base of answers. And the exercise is basically good because you can compare it on a global level. Also, what I would like to show you is an example of a different project, but it's similar as what we used here, to create and rate packaging concepts. These markup and highlight tools work great on a country level, but really worked well on a global level to see, what the respondents were looking for in terms of those products. Last but not least, the most important thing is to have engaged respondents, because engaged respondents mean good data. People found it fun, they liked the shift in questions and exercises, they claimed it was useful, and it was particularly interesting to see others react and respond, and respondents could actually learn from that, from other situations that they were in. So let me just go back a couple of slides and Hannah takes over.
Thanks, Marcel. One of the really important things, and we've touched on this a little bit, but just to kind of flog it, I don't think it's a dead horse yet, but the communication both within kind of the circle of moderators who were each involved in this project and kind of taking it out to the bigger circle of the clients was absolutely crucial. So Marcel, I think, mentioned that we had very frequent debriefs. The debriefs with moderators were twice a day. And the reason for that was because we had moderators all over the globe, and we really had to make them, just as these new market research webinars are kind of geographic centric, we had to make it palatable for somebody in Australia to have a conversation with somebody in Europe. So we had daily, in fact, double daily debriefs among all the moderators, and again, so that input from one country that was something interesting going on, we could then transfer and find out, is that something that's going on at a global level, or is that something that's just happening in that one country? And then we had every other day debriefs with the clients. And this did a couple of things. It made sure that the clients did stay engaged. Frequently, clients get all excited about an online bulletin board or some other online approach, and then life takes over, essentially. And they had intended to be on the board an hour every day, and they just don't have the opportunity. So we found that one thing it did was for us to be able to give the clients kind of a taste of what was happening. After we had our debrief with the moderators, we could say, here are some interesting things that we heard today, which motivated them even more, actually, to go onto the board. And then once we really had them plugged into the board, they were able to see what was going on, and they could ask some tremendous follow-up questions and say, we saw this here. We know for our designers or our engineers that this is something really interesting. How do we incorporate that in the whole questioning process? So that was a really, really terrific kind of continuous circle. I'm going to move on now toward the very end, because where we started was how did we use this qualitative bulletin board approach to answer this kind of global question? And I think somebody had a question in the prior presentation about, well, how do you analyze? What do you get, essentially? The big payoff for us was that we were able to really create country personas that were part of a big immersion session. So all these country affiliates all got together literally in one room at one time, which was kind of remarkable. We were really impressed that our client was able to do that, because that's a lot of time and it's a lot of effort. People flew in from all over the globe, and we did a 2-day immersion session where the idea was not only to immerse the local affiliates and the global team in all the different kind of personas and feelings that each of the people in the countries have, but also ultimately to generate these ideas, right, for new products, maybe new solutions. And so you can kind of see just a very glimpse of this, but really we had pretty intensive, detailed dossier that we gave to each of the local affiliates, and they were able to really get into the pictures and the videos and the language of the respondents in their countries. Is there one typical respondent per country? No, there never is. But we were able to get at least a feel for this. These are the common themes that we heard throughout, and these are what these respondents were able to convey to us. So you can kind of see some of this. This is hugely condensed. I mean, we're talking about 40 pages of material, really, which is why it was 2 days. But, you know, I start my day this way. The ideal location would look like this. This part of health is important to me. I'm anxious or not anxious, maybe, about getting sick, and where does responsibility for health live with me? And in a lot of countries, it turns out it lives individually, personally. So it was very interesting. That was what we wanted to tell you about. We would love to field some questions.